At Sutton Bonnington many years ago, and the regular observer went on holiday. I used to have to fill in for him, and you had to be here at 9 o'clock precisely. In summertime that would be 10 o'clock because we were working on Greenwich Mean Time, and you had to do all the readings at that time. So you have a temperature reading at 9 o'clock and a humidity reading. Now, temperature is going to change through the day, so the 9 o'clock reading isn't actually all that helpful. It's representative of 9 o'clock. What you really want is something that's representative of the day as a whole. So the way in which that's done is, again, when observations were made manually, the way in which that's done is to take a measurement of the minimum temperature, which normally occurs at night, and a measurement of the maximum temperature, which normally occurs sometime early afternoon, and you simply take the average. The average is roughly, not always, but roughly the average temperature of across the whole day. You can argue about it, but basically that's a relatively simple way of getting the average. And minimum, I managed to find a minimum temperature thermometer, which is not quite working, but basically it's an alcohol thermometer. It's got a metal sort of dumbbell which is stuck at this end at the moment. It should be lying down here somewhere, and when the temperature goes down, the meniscus on the alcohol pulls that thing down and leaves it behind at the minimum temperature, and then you reset it with a magnet to the proper position the next day. So you get the minimum temperature at night. I'll pass this round if you want to have a look at it, and do take care of it, please. And the maximum thermometer is a mercury thermometer, which works like the old-fashioned thing you used to stick under your tongue when you had a fever. These days, if you go to Boots and buy one, they have a electronic thing. They don't sell mercury ones anymore because they're reckoned to be dangerous. But again, that records the maximum temperature, and from the average of those two, you've got a pretty good idea of the temperature through the day. This particular site, because the interest here has always been agriculture, they've got a number of extra measurements. They're particularly interested, for example, in soil temperatures, and these pipes going into the ground are measuring the temperature of the soil down here. At least I assume that's what they are. That's normally measured at different depths, and one of the ways of measuring soil temperature is one of the ways of measuring soil temperature is simply a thermometer in a tube, and you put this thermometer on a chain and you stick it down a pipe and you leave it there. So this might be suspended on a chain a meter deep in the soil, and then all you do is pull it out and you read it, and this blob of wax here is simply to stop the temperature changing too quickly while you're reading it. The blob of wax just provides some thermal inertia, slows it down so you can read it. The temperature won't change for several minutes, so you can get a good measurement of the temperature at 1 meter depth or 50 centimeters or wherever it happens to be hanging. I'll pass that round as well, and again, please don't drop it. And if anyone wants to look at this one, they've also traditionally measured, you remember, well, if you ever listen to the forecast, you sometimes hear comments like there will be an air frost, or there'll be a ground frost, but not necessarily an air frost. An air frost is when the temperature in here, which is 1.5 meters height, goes below 0 degrees. But that tends to, well, we tend to get conditions that will produce a frost on the ground more often than we get conditions that produce a frost in here. And the ground frost can be important because that affects, if you've got sort of sensitive flowers and things coming up, they could be affected. Or it can affect conditions for driving, for example. And that's what this is. It used to be done on grass. This is the first time I've seen it done on AstroTurf. But that thing there is a thermometer. It's suspended just above the AstroTurf. And that will be recording the temperature at that level. And that is supposed to be representative of a ground frost. And then when they started really thinking about conditions for icing on roads, they realized that grass conditions weren't quite the same as road conditions, and so they brought in an extra instrument which is measuring, in this case, the temperature on the concrete slab here. And it's those sorts of measurements that provide the climatological background for predictions about what conditions will produce icing on roads, and that's then determines the decision to put out salt for de-icing. So that kind of thing actually has quite a direct application. I think I've just about done temperature. Has anybody got any questions up to this point? Get in here. I can't take it. Number of wires coming out of here. In which case it's all being recorded on a data logger in that packet. So yeah, there are parts of the world where manual observations still take place, but manual observation is actually quite expensive, and so there's been a transition, and in this country it's progressively over the last 20 years probably moved almost entirely to automatic weather stations, and that's an example of a sort of down the bottom there, a standalone automatic weather station. It again has all the components, a miniature Stevenson screen, but in the shape of a tin can, wind measurements, measuring the direction and the speed, and it doesn't appear to be measuring rainfall. Wind speed is something I should mention. Again, this is a key factor. The official height for measuring wind speed is actually 10 meters. And if you look back to the gate where we came in with the bus, there's a mast back there, and there's a wind speed measuring device called an anemometer, which is flipping around on the top of it. So that would be the official measurement of wind speed. But 10 meters actually, and the idea of 10 meters is it gets you away from any local influence of trees and things on the ground. 10 meters isn't terribly practical. It's quite expensive to build the mast.
Yeah.
And so a lot of observations are made at lower levels, and then there are approximate methods of working out what it should be at 10 meters. And so that one there at 2 meters allows you to compare 2 meters and 10 meters, and you can get a comparison. The other thing here, and actually this is the instrument I did my PhD with, or part of it, is, I'll let you guess, what's that measuring?
Radiation.
Yes. This is measuring solar radiation, and actually it's a good example of the problem that was solved by the Stevenson screen here, which is separating solar effects from air temperature effects. Here you have an instrument, it's actually effectively measuring the temperature in the middle of that instrument. That's the mechanism by which it works, but that temperature in this case represents the intensity of the solar energy and is insulated from the effects of the atmosphere. You can see it's double